first, if you don't mind. Mr. Flynn, you're first on the list. You've spoken several times. Do you want to address the commission?
I'm trying to take a hint. I would love to briefly address the commission, but
Please.
if you're tired of hearing from me, I will.
No, not at all. You have every right, as does everybody in the room, so feel free.
Commissioner, Chairman Chapman, members of the commission, thank you. And I will be very brief with my comments. My name is Ryan Flynn. I am the executive director for the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. Prior to taking over NMOGA, I had the opportunity to serve as both a general counsel and a cabinet secretary for an environmental regulatory agency. And so I know how difficult it is to fashion environmental regulations for a variety of different industries, and I have done them for groundwater, surface water, drinking water, and air quality, as well as hazardous waste. So I am very experienced with the difficulty in the undertaking, and I would say that at the outset, that is a very difficult job that your planning and zoning office has had to embark upon. And while I will have some constructive comments, I don't in any way want to suggest that their effort is easy, and I appreciate the undertaking that they've been working on over the last year now. I would just open by saying, first and foremost, the house that this ordinance this is built upon, this foundation rather, is flawed. I would urge the county not to build an ordinance based on Santa Fe, San Miguel, or Rio Arriba County. When oil and gas does have an opportunity to engage with the Planning and Zoning Commission, we stand ready to do so. And we would really encourage Sandoval County, if it is going to move forward with an ordinance for the oil and gas industry, to really do an ordinance that works for Sandoval County. And right now, at the direction that you're moving in the draft ordinance that we've seen is problematic for a variety of reasons, but chiefly because there's so much overlap and duplication in the draft ordinance that's been put out to the public. You have the United States Environmental Protection Agency, you have the New Mexico Environment Department, you have the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, you have the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Land Management, you have the Department of Labor and the Occupational Health and Safety Bureau. You have all of these different regulatory agencies who we are currently operating under. And there are numerous areas in your proposed ordinance where there's direct conflict with state and federal law. And rather than including a catch-all provision saying where there's conflict that will take precedence, just eliminate it. There's no need for it to be there. And I would strongly encourage you to focus on those areas that are truly within the county's purview. The nuisance issues, the issues you identified about public safety, setback requirements, emergency response plans. Those issues are issues that are truly within the domain from both a legal and a policy perspective to be handled by the county. We would stand ready to work with the county when we do have an opportunity to do so. I would point out that the current proposal requires the county to undertake a very difficult task. That is creating a brand new permitting program and an enforcement program for the county. Having managed an agency with 650 employees, $120 million operating budget that did environmental enforcement, I can tell you this is an extremely difficult undertaking. And I would encourage you not to create a new permitting program. If you do move forward with an ordinance, I would encourage you to have a prescriptive permit by rule that simply says what you shall and shall not do, and then enforce that rule. But to the idea that somehow the Planning and Zoning Office is going to be able to parallel the state, which is taking 10 days or less to make permit application determinations, is really, I think, it's unrealistic. You don't have those resources on staff, and you would not be able to get a consultant to do that, nor would any of the fees proposed be able to cover the type of work that is being proposed you undertake in this ordinance. The final point I would just make again is that none of the experts that were here today were compensated by the oil and gas industry or the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. we want to engage on the facts. You had 2 petroleum engineers, one of whom is the cabinet secretary for the Energy and Minerals Department, Secretary McQueen. And then you had the professor from New Mexico Junior College, Kelly Tooker. Both of them are petroleum engineer backgrounds. You also had Tom Clifford with a PhD in natural resource economics. Industry always wants to proceed based on facts and evidence, because when we do, we can work with you and anyone else when the conversations are based on facts and science. When the conversations are based on emotion, a lot of what you heard today, and unfortunately a lot of which manifested itself in at least the draft of the ordinance that I've seen, we move farther and farther away from being able to come up with something that's reasonable and that industry would truly be able to live with. I just would say again, thank you for this opportunity. We do stand ready when planning and zoning is ready to engage with industry. Industry absolutely stands ready to come to the table, and we will do so with experts, with facts and with science, and with a desire to get something done and avoid having to litigate or get in any type of unnecessary fights. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Next on the list is Ms. Sontag.
Good morning, I'm Carla Sontag with the New Mexico Business Coalition. I thank you for the opportunity to make a comment, and I'm going to be brief because I think a lot of our points have been covered. I honestly don't believe that we need an ordinance in Sandoval County. I think that there is plenty of regulation at the state and federal level. You may have a need for some rules over dust or other things like that that a county could address. I just want to encourage you to keep in mind the economic impact that the oil and gas industry has in your county and on the state budget and in education. It's critical to all of us, the job creation. And I would encourage you, if you must go forward with an ordinance, that you listen to the people that are in the industry, because they have the knowledge of what needs to be done and what can be done effectively to accomplish your goals and also continue developing oil and natural and gas so that the economy can continue to move and people can have these good paying jobs. I think they've been good stewards. I think they have been good community members. They give back to the community in addition to what they are providing to the budget and to education. And we need more of that. And I think as you make this decision, you're going to impact not only the people in your county, but the state as a whole by what you produce. And so I hope that it's something that is workable for all parties and that you're open to that kind of feedback to see what will make it work effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sontag. Mr. Manat?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for a fantastic morning. Thank you for an open mind. Thank you for being willing to listen and to learn, as I'm sure many of the folks were in the room. Unfortunately, there are probably a few that weren't, but thank you for your openness and for the opportunity. With respect to an obviously very intelligent gentleman, Mr. Wesley, it would have really benefited me for him to go first, because the rest of the morning was spent addressing virtually every point that he makes. Excellent points and all. One thing that I picked up in his presentation that I think is really important for the commissioners and for the people of Sandoval County was a mention that typically in the oil and gas industry, the surface owner does not benefit or enjoy or have access to the minerals. Interestingly, in southern Sandoval County, in the 3 townships, 200 square miles or so of southern Sandoval County that has been developed by AMREP. AMREP, when they sold the surface to the surface purchaser, be it a 1/4 acre or 5 acres or 20 acres, some 30 to 50,000 transactions, until just a couple of years ago, they also assigned a net profits interest in the mineral rights to that property owner. So commissioners, I will tell you that a large number, a majority, very likely, of your constituents do have a direct economic vested interest in seeing the oil and gas industry develop in southern Sandoval County. That is, as Mr. Wesley points out, an extremely unusual and very fortunate situation for the residents of southern Sandoval County and Rio Rancho to be in. It may surprise you, but I actually agree, coming from 180 degrees opposite position with the lady in the back who advocates one set of standards, one set of rules for the entire county. I advocate the same thing. I wish to know what the rules are and play by the rules that you set, as with everyone else in the county. So I'm a lifelong New Mexican, except for absences for military. I'm a small businessman, 38 years in the industry, trying to do business in your county, trying to come and create jobs, economic development, additional revenues for your schools, additional revenues for your kids, and new dollars for your economy. And we all know, and I respect Sandoval County, it's been tough the last 10 years here. You've lost a lot of employment base and a lot of GDP. This industry can help. I've spent the last 18 years of my career studying the geology of this region, and specifically Sandoval County. I've looked at hundreds of miles of seismic data, and I heard some questions today, and I'll try to give you some reasonably accurate answers to some of those questions. In Sandoval County, my census is there are approximately 1,500 existing oil and gas wells, predominantly in the Northwest. Of those, 650 are active today. You have 650 producing wells, more or less, in Sandoval County, including approximately 100 of these new modern lateral wells that are generating spectacular results in the formation called the Mancos Shale, centered in Liebrook, near Cuba, New Mexico. There are approximately 30 to 50 wells that penetrate below the water table here in this part of Sandoval County. You asked the Albuquerque Basin, so there are a total of about somewhere between 30 to 50 wells that do that, and it just depends on how far out you want to look. If you want to focus in Sandoval County, it's less than that number, but the aquifer continues southward, and so that you can look at 30 to 50 wells to answer that question. There are 12 wells in Sandoval County and Bernalillo County, total of 12, that actually penetrate all the way down to basement, or at least to somewhere below the Mancos Shale formation, which is the highly economic target of those new 100 wells in northwestern Sandoval County. What my study and what my staff thinks, and the staff is PhD geophysicists, PhD geologists, PhD hydrogeologists, geochemists, petrophysicists, what we believe is that trend comes straight down into southern Sandoval County and comprises an enormous opportunity, but we only have 12 data points over 1.5 million acres in Bernalillo, Sandoval, and elsewhere to make that judgment. So let me be the first to admit, it's a pretty sparse data set for the size of what we're looking at. So the objective in the first well, or the first two wells, or the first four wells, a couple of which were proposed here some time back, is purely science. We are trying to prove with absolutely modern drilling techniques, mainly by coring the Mancos interval and logging the Mancos interval, which has not been done in this basin. All of the geochemistry in this basin has been done from samples coming out of those 12 well bores. There's been no coring. So industry is not, in my opinion, in southern Sandoval County yet ready to come here. And what we're trying to do is open that door and enable that from a purely 100% scientific basis, driven by, as has been suggested by other scientists and intelligent people in the room, robust measurement. And when we core, that analysis takes months. It includes rock pyrolysis, it includes other geochemical investigations, It includes robust measurements of porosity, permeability, et cetera, et cetera. So we would ask the commission to be open to permitting that should it happen sooner than you're ready to promulgate an ordinance, if indeed you feel the need to promulgate an ordinance. I would just like to reiterate in closing, and thank you for the time, that we are probably one of the most heavily regulated industries in America and in New Mexico. There are 750 pages of OCD regulation on the books right now. There are thousands of pages of BLM regulation on the books right now, and we haven't even scratched the surface of EIA, EPA, EID, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, et cetera, et cetera. Literally everything that has been discussed this morning is already subject to regulation. Do we think that the county has a prerogative and a right to manage its land use wisely? Absolutely yes. And this industry is here to be a good neighbor. We're here to contribute our part to respect the economy and the people of Sandoval County and to do something good to bring about new jobs, new opportunity, new economy for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manette. Before I ask anybody else to come up from the public, the question I have is, by show of hands, if you did sign up, have any of the previous speakers pretty much said what you want to say? Tom, you're next. So do you feel like you have new conversation to add? I want to give you an opportunity to speak.
I appreciate the opportunity, but for the most part, the comments I would be making have been addressed.
And how about for Sharon?
I feel pretty much the same way, except one thing has not been addressed that I feel is important. When I've heard about water usage in Sandoval County, the one thing that I have not heard is the abundance of brackish water available that could be used in fracking in that area.
Okay, all right, you're referring to the Rio Puerco.
That's exactly it.
Okay, very good. Sylvia, I think she left. All right, let's move on. Alan, Dr. Friedman? You've got new conversation to add?
Just a few points. And
Okay.
I think Bob Wesley went over a lot of stuff and important, but I'd just like to make a few points. My name's Alan Friedman. I live at 52 Anasazi Trails Loop in Placitas. And although the federal and state agencies have responsibility to protect our communities, Washington and Santa Fe are far away. Furthermore, they have neither the budget nor the staff, or they especially tuned in to what's happening locally to protect our health, safety, and welfare. The county should not depend solely on OCD, Oil Conservation Division, for the impacts of oil and gas production. OCD regulations focus largely on downhole behavior, not largely on the surface impacts to the community. OCD has neither authority or resources to enforce effectively. I think in New Mexico have been drilled over 100,000 wells, and I don't know the exact number now. I had approximately a dozen, but there are probably a few more than that, inspectors. Post-permit monitoring and enforcement paid by industry should be required. Developing an ordinance without monitoring and enforcement is a waste of effort. Local baseline measurements should be required as part of the permitting process. They are to prevent not our fault and to allow protective requirements like water, air, light, noise to be stated in terms of not worse than or so much over baseline. And 4, a permit should not be permanent. A permit should not be permanent. It should be periodically reviewed and capable of a suspension for violation. This would provide real incentive for responsible behavior and to encourage prioritization of safety over shortcuts. An oil well brought to production costs $5 to $8 million, a lot of money. a $500 fine is not an effective deterrent to bad behavior. So I would say for directors to staff, don't depend on OCD alone. Require monitoring on an ongoing basis. Require baseline measurements, and establish leverage on operators to behave responsibly through the permit process. The County Commission has the general authority to provide by ordinance for the health, safety, and welfare of the community. The buck stops with you.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman. Going on down the list, Ernie Torres?
May I?
Yes, absolutely. If you have something new to add to the conversation, sir.
Certainly do.
Thank you.
I'm a rancher and farmer in near La Jara, northern Sandoval County, about 7 miles south of the Rio Reba line.
I know exactly where Lara is.
Okay, well then. Across the fence line to the west is the Hickory Apache Reservation. They've been fracking for years, okay, years. Okay, up by the divide just west of Cuba, there's another well that was fracked last year, okay. And I have 3 water wells, none of them have been affected by any drilling or fracking over the last, since I've been in business. And I've been in business all my life. Now, I think there needs to be an awareness of our area as a land-based economy. Okay, we don't have microchips. We don't have. We're not building special weapons like Los Alamos Lab. It's strictly livestock, forage, and I'm hoping oil and gas. My family, all of us have mineral rights, and all my neighbors have mineral rights. The whole area is full of patented land. We're going to get directly affected if you regulate us off of this right. Now, I never thought I'd ever learn anything from Mr. Wesley, but he did say something here about case law, something about 80 to 90%. If your resource or your property right, and you still have 20%, I guess it's not a takings, right? Something along those lines. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but we're worried about this. If we can't appreciate our mineral rights, then why the hell do we have it? You know, why are we there? Now, I'm going to tell you something here. I'm ready to go. I'm all for drill, baby, drill, and I'm not worried. I'm not worried about contamination on my wells. If I was, I wouldn't let it happen. I think every landowner should have that choice. We don't need this regulation. I'm going to tell you something else, sir. I'm not telling you this asking for compassion, but 26% of our population there in that area, that part of the county, is poverty level. And I'll bet you, I'm really willing to say that not half of those people realize that they are poverty level. We're used to living off the land. If you want meat, you go shoot an elk or you go slaughter a cow. You know, we're different than all these folks here. And we've been around a lot longer, generations after generations after generations, and we want to use our mineral right now. So if you regulate us out, consider what happened in Mora. And if you don't know what happened in Mora, look it up. Don't take my word for it. They got taken to court. They had to roll back on their regs. So don't hurt us. Don't hurt us. We've got property rights. We're going to use it. And if we have to get lawyers to push back on you guys, we will. But we don't need any more rules here. Okay? Now, I'm part of a land-based economy. I'm a commissioner for a ditch system. I'm also on the board of directors for a cattle growers association. I'm a member of the Northern New Mexico Stockmen's Association. It's all about land-based economies, folks. And we're so different from you. We shouldn't even be in the same county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. Adam Delgado.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, thank you for your time today. My name is Adán Delgado. I'm Executive Director of the Northwest Regional Educational Cooperative. We're an educational organization. It's a state entity that is made up of 7 member school districts in north central New Mexico. One of our districts is Cuba. I'm also a resident of Cuba. And I have a few comments about, mainly about the information provided by Dr. Clifford. In being a superintendent for 10 years in northern New Mexico, I've seen the real effects of some of the decisions that you're making regarding regulation in the industry up in northern New Mexico. I live and raise my children in Sandoval County, so I'm very interested in this issue, and I thank you for your time that you're investing in this issue. I think it's very important. It's already been said today, it's important for New Mexico to diversify its revenue sources. We're seeing the effects of not having that diversification, but in the meantime, we need to invest in the things that we have available to us, and oil and gas is one of the sources of our huge sources of our revenue source, one of our huge revenue sources. I've also seen the real effect of some of these changes that have taken place in the oil and gas industry, and also in our dependence on the federal government. You know, when we've cycled down, when I was superintendent in Pewaukee, we saw the labs cycle down some of their spending, and saw the real effects of those, the lowered spending, the fewer jobs, and later on even the further impacts that it had on service industries throughout the area. We see the real effects that has on our students, on the parents that are trying to raise their children in our communities. So the work that you're doing is extremely important. I appreciate the work that you're putting into even getting third-party information from places like New Mexico Tech on the real science, and not just subjective feelings about some of these issues. And in the end, I just ask you that you continue to keep our interests in mind as citizens, but at the same time not impose any unnecessary regulation on the industry that is going to affect our families and our children that are being raised in our communities. And we have very direct, the revenue generated by this industry has a very direct effect on the general fund in the state, but it also has effects, as Dr. Clifford showed earlier, on our capital expenditures in school districts. The valuation of property that generates our bonding capacity is directly affected by the operations of the oil and gas industry in places like Cuba and the other districts up north. So thank you very much for your time, and just ask you that you continue to consider the effects on education in northern New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Mr. Suazo? Are you?
Mr. Commissioners and members of the public, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I'd like to share a little bit about my background in a way so you understand where I come at this issue, and also at the end share a little bit about what makes me a little bit different from everybody else that you've heard from today. I'm an environmental lawyer, I'm a water lawyer, I do wind and solar energy, I do oil and gas. I represent small companies and large companies. I represent individuals against companies, and my firm does deals. I have been protecting New Mexico's lands as a career my whole life. I used to work for the U.S. Senate for former U.S. Senator Jeff Bingaman, and I was one of the staffers that worked on protecting the Valle Vidal. I was the lead staffer on the project designating the Upper Pecos Cowles area as a quality water area. I worked on the Vermejo Park issues. I worked on public lands issues, PILT issues, which the counties like yours and others need for revenue and resources. And I'm also a business attorney. My firm does deals in the region, New Mexico, Texas, and Colorado. I started my own law practice about 5 years ago, and for the first 2.5 years, I struggled mightily to develop my practice in this state, and I failed miserably. But I succeeded wildly in Texas and Colorado. And this is a jobs issue for me. This is about opportunity for our state, and I am the embodiment of standing on a lot of shoulders, growing up on a cattle ranch in northern New Mexico as the 7th generation. I too grew up working off of the land and having the land support me. And this is the next development phase that I feel is important for this area. I don't want to live in southeast New Mexico. I want to live in Albuquerque. My office here in New Mexico is about half a mile behind us, right along the Rio Grande. But I can't be here full time because most of my work comes from other states. People from other states hire me to help them navigate the regulations that are imposed by the government. And many of them are necessary. Some of them can be overdone. And I think it's really important to understand, as a person who operates in 3 different states, New Mexico does a pretty good job of regulating this industry. Can it be improved? Sure. What can't? Anything can always be done better. But there is a very specific role for county level regulation of this industry. I have reviewed the ordinances, the various versions, and I do think that many pieces of it are misguided. I think there is some substantial overreach in sections, and I think that needs to be really addressed. But I also would like to impart that I am also the legal counsel for Thrust Energy, the company with a real stake in the outcome of this issue. And the longer this issue carries on, the harder it is for my client and to create jobs in this county, in your county. Now, what makes me different from everybody else in this room that you've heard from today is I'm a millennial entrepreneur. I have my own practice. I provide jobs to 4 other individuals. Nobody else here has graduated, who opposes or is hesitant for this to go forward, faces the constraints that I do, that my generation faces, because I've had to leave New Mexico to make a living, and I've tried desperately to keep my ties to the state whenever and wherever I can, but I cannot make a living in New Mexico, and I'd like to. I'd like to work from Albuquerque full-time, but I can't. I have to balance my business interests by going to other places. Mr. Wesley talked about the cost of compliance, and they're real, because let me tell you, I'm not cheap. And those costs do impact the ability of people to operate here. If it's not going to happen here, it's going to happen somewhere. The question is, do you want it? And I think you can, as a commission, do it well in a way that balances the various interests. I'd like to help you to do that and to achieve that. So my question is, if not here, then where? One thing I'd like for you to look at is go to your computer when you get home and do a Google Map search of Vermejo Park, owned by Ted Turner. We all know what his political persuasions are and what his interests are. But if you zoom down on his ranch, you'll see a bunch of wells. And guess what? It's one of the most beautiful and pristine places we have in our state. I hope you all get the chance to visit it one day. And he's doing it, and he's making money off of it, and he's protecting the environment and creating a sanctuary for wildlife and water and everything else. So with that in mind, I wish you the very best in moving forward with this ordinance as quickly as possible, because jobs literally are depending on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suazo. And last on my list is, and I'm probably not going to get this right, perchance. Verchinsky, okay. Sorry.
Anytime you see an SKI at the end of a person's name, pronounce it phonetically and you'll be right about 99% of the time. It's just that it's longer and it's harder for somebody to say other than Dave. All right. Anyway, my name is Stephen Verchinsky. I'm the co-chair of the Albuquerque, well actually the Green Party of the Albuquerque metropolitan area. I used to work for BLM. I used to work for Ron Montoya, who eventually became head of Lands and Realty for BLM. Worked on the cadastral surveys, and I was here out of the Albuquerque district as well as working on a Moab. So resource extraction is not something that's out of my purview. I'm also degreed in natural resources management and policy, and I look at it maybe a little bit differently than everybody, but everybody wants to be protected. I don't think anybody wants to not be protected by a local government and taking care of the health and welfare of its citizens. That said, I've taken a look at San Juan County. I've had a number of cases to be up there to work with folks. And when you have a compressor station that's running at 85 decibels, well, 85 decibels is what you're hearing at your porch That's a little bit different than having a economic engine in your backyard. It's something that's something else. It's a nuisance, and it's within inside the purview of ordinances that are at the local level. Mr. Bob Wesley brought up that you need to go and plug the loopholes. Well, yes, you need to plug the loopholes. And there's a big glaring one that's out there right now. It's called Donald Trump. The loophole that he's looking at is eliminating all basically federal regulations and gutting acts like the what I hold dear, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act. Those are something that were put forward and signed into law by Richard Nixon. So this is not something that's partisan issues, it's actually bipartisan from the standpoint of protecting the public health. But when I hear that it's going to be cut, and I look, for example, at San Miguel's ordinance, and it has the overall list of all the federal acts that need to be complied with by the companies that move into an area, but they're salivating and not having to go ahead and comply with them because that makes it easier for them to go and put in wherever they want to go and put in. A big recommendation that I would make for you, have reviewed the ordinance, is that plugging the loopholes means that when the federal government decides to go ahead and give up on regulating an industry, or even the state government decides to go ahead and give up on regulating the industry. For example, we had the issues with regarding the production ponds and how they were going to be dealt with, and whether or not toxic chemicals were going to end up killing off your local wildlife. That's something that is of a concern to me because other people use the land other than just the oil and gas industry, particularly surface owners that we heard here today, the ones up from northern Sandoval counties. You know, if you're running cattle and everything, you're concerned about how well the area is being taken care of. So what I would recommend is plugging the loophole is, of course, right from the beginning, that you say that if the federal government or the state government rescinds any of their laws or regulations, that you have the option to go ahead and take it on over as part of the overall ordinance. And I was just up in Counselor, and the health assessment was being done, and they found air quality that was not what I would consider to be good. It was they took some grab samples up there and found that toluenes exceedances, for example. When I was up there, and I asked a group of about 60 people inside the room, how many of you feel ill today? Because when I came up, I felt a little bit of physical illness once I got up into the area between Nageezi and Counselor. And the only thing I can attribute to is it changed the air quality at that point in time. Wasn't it? I ate something bad in the morning. But I asked the people there, and it was about 10% of the people, you know, about 15 to 20% of the people raised their hands and said they're feeling some impact here today. So, but we can't quantify it. And the problem is that the agencies, like our New Mexico Environmental Health Department, who I spoke with Mark Jones the other day, we do not have the monitoring stations up. So you have no baseline data. All you have is modeling, and what a few citizens have done as grab bag samples and paid costly for having those samples analyzed. So what do you need to do? Well, what you need to do is to go and make sure that the industry ponies up. They're making profits on it, or they wouldn't be in the business. And if it means that we have to go ahead and get some taxation on back, for example, I did note that there was a downturn in the amount of revenues that were coming in from the companies. Is that because, number one, we're releasing all the leases all at once, and so we're depreciating the value of the asset that's coming out of the ground, or is it something else? Is it the tax structure that we've set up here over the last number of years with the governor? And I'll go and point that out right from the beginning, because the first year that she was in office, we looked at a $40 million tax cut that cost the state much more than that. And then the latest rounds in which we had legislators that weren't even reading the darn document, am I correct? He's smiling over there. They were reading the darn document, and they signed the wrong one. It was brought over for tax abatement at the legislature. So anyway, Those are some of the issues I think that you need to concern yourself with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verjanski. Young lady in the back here, even though she didn't sign up for public comment, as is our tradition, and I'm gonna let you speak to Mr. Guessing, and we've got another gentleman. We got another one, okay, this might take a little longer than I hoped. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. My name is Joya Sparson. I'm the Intergovernmental Relations Director with New Mexico Association of Counties. Our familiarity with this issue stems from the different ordinances. Some of those have been mentioned briefly. San Miguel, the lawsuit in Mora, Rio Arriba. It has been an interesting process for us to watch as this has played out. Mora, we were very concerned as an outside public interest, took basically a hold of the county government, pushed an agenda, which did cost the county and its constituents quite dearly. As we started to move forward, we really wanted to find solutions that would give local commissions like yourselves the opportunity to be educated on sometimes these very scientific and technical fields. We were approached by Secretary Martin and New Mexico Tech, and at that point they offered to serve as that kind of nonpartisan, non-political technical resource to the counties. And we began to advocate for that. They presented to our board of directors several times. And this county is actually the first time we're seeing some of those partnerships play out. We certainly respect that as a local government, you know your constituents better than anybody, and we certainly support that these decisions should be balanced at a local level. With that said, it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not there's a need for an ordinance, and if so, what's within your purview and your right to make that fair and balanced for all these parties. I would say that after the Mora incident, we did see legislation that came out that would specifically prohibit local governments from any type of preemption of other regulations at state and federal levels. So it's very important to us that you've taken that into consideration and made sure that we don't duplicate those efforts. And with that, I'd like to just commend you for taking such a balanced and fair approach on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mr. Guessing.
Good morning, Commissioners. I will also be brief. I'm Paul Guessing, President of the Rio Grande Foundation, a free market policy research organization here in New Mexico. I believe that Sandoval County should not adopt zoning with regard to oil and gas. If it does, it should do so in the least harmful way possible. Having traveled around this state, I believe San Juan County is an excellent example of how oil and gas exploration and retrieval can be done in harmony with the local community. The county has no zoning and no local regulation, but also 20,000 wells over 5,500 square miles. Federal protections are in place, as is NMOGA's Good Neighbor program, which I'm not sure if it's been addressed today or not, but that's very helpful in some of these areas when there are conflicts between neighbors and oil and gas wells. The city of Farmington also has dozens or perhaps even more than 100 oil and gas wells distributed throughout its borders. They, of course, have additional rules and regulations in place within a city. But having spent a great time there, I can assure you that you hardly even notice them. There's golf courses and other facilities where there's oil and gas quietly going on in the background and you don't even see it. The American Lung Association ranks San Juan County as having some of the cleanest air in the nation with the lowest particulate issues in the entire country. Sandoval County has staked out a claim unique in this area of the state as a business-friendly county. That being said, New Mexico as a whole has the highest unemployment rate in the nation and struggles with high poverty levels and limited economic opportunities, as discussed earlier. That's especially true with lower and working class New Mexicans of limited educational attainment. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Sandoval County's unemployment rate is at 6.5%, just below the state average of 6.7. I know a different number was cited earlier, but on top of these things, I'm pretty sure it's 6.7 statewide and 6.5 here locally. And the national rate is 4.4%. Clearly, this county, as well as the rest of New Mexico, has a long way to go with regards to the economy. A moratorium or knee-jerk NIMBY-style regulations would be disastrous for this economy, And I believe that we have good models, including most notably San Juan County, as one that we can look towards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gassing. Mr. Mullins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Tom Mullins. I currently serve as president of the Independent Petroleum Association of New Mexico. I live in Farmington, New Mexico. I'm also, my particular company, Synergy Operating. We're an oil and gas operator that has operated in Sandoval County for 21 years now. I would like to caution, I guess, the Commission upon adopting additional regulation. You've heard a number of people testify here today. Any additional regulation that is burdened has a cumulative impact. We have a large number of federal regulations that are going into effect. Most recently in the news was the venting and flaring regulation from the Bureau of Land Management, that there was some indication that Mr. Trump was going to wave a magic wand and make that go away. My experience with both taxation and regulation is it seldom ever goes away. It just seems to morph into a different category. So with regard to particular regulations, it's a challenge to operate in the oil and gas business. I think what we're talking about are a few wells. I heard Mr. Manat say between 2 to 4 wells. I think we need to be very cautious as the Commission and the county. We currently have an ability for those permits to occur, the 2 to 4 wells to be permitted, and a process to go through and to go through planning and zoning to get those permits. My personal preference would be to see that continue for 2 to 4 wells without having the unintended consequence of impacting a very large portion of Sandoval County that is generating a significant amount of revenue. So we look forward to working with planning and zoning and the other constituents here to whatever direction the Commission decides to go. But again, we are local folks right here working and putting our tax dollars here in this area, so we appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mullins. Gentleman here in green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Tachias. I come from God's country, Cabazon, New Mexico. I've got 9 generations of farming and ranching underneath our belt. So we fully understand about the delicate balance of energy and the environment. I also retired a few years ago out of the military, Lieutenant Colonel of the United States Army. Over 34 years, I have 5 combat tours overseas. And so why am I here? I'm here to represent the veterans here in New Mexico. And I represent a group called Vets for Energy. Our main mission, of course, is just finding jobs for our guys. The training, the education, the whole 9 yards. It's a very difficult challenge that we're going through, and we understand the economics that's going on in Sandoval County. I live here, I have a ranch here, and it's a constant struggle. So one of the individuals in the back talked about the minorities, and one of the things that you have to understand is that the veterans, we represent 1% of the nation's population. So when we talk about a minority, that's us. And then the combat veterans that are coming back, we're even smaller. So we're trying to find these guys jobs. All these guys are in transition. They're trying to, find a place in a home right here in New Mexico, and the struggle is on. What I'd like to say is that gas and oil has been paramount in supporting us, helping us to find those jobs, helping our guys to get education and training. This is critical to who we are, and I'm hoping that this continues. And it's just been an amazing journey since I retired. I didn't know I was going to be doing this kind of a mission over here, supporting veterans, but it's remarkable, and I'm glad to do it. So I want to keep this short and sweet. The bottom line is this, is that overregulation, I don't believe in that. We experience this all overseas in combat. Our hands get tied. A lot of guys get killed over this. And I know Commissioner Block, who served in the military, he's a retired lieutenant colonel, he understands all this stuff also. we have enough over-regulations going on right now in this county. And it's not going to be successful in what we're doing right now. So I'll end it with that, and thank you, gentlemen, for this opportunity, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service, too. All right, I'm going to call it a wrap on public comment. As is our tradition, we always try to go above and beyond when we're talking about public comment. The reality is we've had some tremendous input from the public with the initiatives that this board is undertaking. This is just one of them. I would like to ask my fellow commissioners at this point to make comments along the lines of policy, developing a consensus, and providing direction for particularly Director Springfield as to what we want to do going forward. We do have a draft ordinance out there. How appropriate is it? I think that's still up for debate, but I would like to hear from my fellow commissioners, and then I'll make some closing comments. Who wants to go first? Commissioner Dominguez.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for all the information. You did educate me tremendously with all the information, all the research that all of you have done. I think that as a commissioner and working with Mr. Springfield and the P&Z board, we have a job to do, and they have a job to do. And first of all is that, you know, we do have to support the constituents and get their information and all the good or bad, but we will feel that we will move forward and do the right thing. And again, I just want to thank all of you for being here and giving us a great presentation and all the comments that we received. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner Dominguez. Commissioner Isle.
Yeah, I again want to thank everyone who took the time to come and share their thoughts, whichever side of the issue you're on. It's good to help us in making a tough decision. I think we need to continue along the line that we're proceeding. Planning and Zoning Board is going to hear from OCD, and then we'll hear from more of the public through the P&C process, and somewhere along the line, probably sometime in the fall, we'll probably get to make a final decision on this. I just want to point out that back when we started this discussion about a year ago, longer than a year ago, there was a need for a moratorium. See how long this process takes? There wasn't.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe. Commissioner Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you all for coming. I mean, I see people from Placitas here. I've been educated on this issue. I've had lunch with Dr. Friedman, Mr. Wesley as well. And I have met with other people from the industry. I have met with my constituents as well. And I appreciate all of you coming out, and I certainly understand your passion. And your passion is for Sandoval County. Your passion is for the environment. Your passion is for jobs. Your passion is for your family so they can be raised here. I have a daughter who will graduate from the University of New Mexico in December. Chances are she's going to leave the state. She's, by the way, in the majority of our college graduates who leave the state. Because whatever they're doing in Texas, Colorado, and Arizona, they're doing it a hell of a lot better than we are. And we know what they're doing. They're competing, and we're not competing. We have a very difficult job ahead of us on the Planning and Zoning Commission and here on the County Commission. And that's threading the needle. Threading the needle between the environment and our future and economic development. We're an extremely poor state because of bad policies over many decades. And there's so much opportunity here in the state. There's so many different ways to make a difference to attract businesses here and private industry. So we're not tied to the federal government. So we're not tied to oil and gas. Intel is in my district. We have lost almost 2,000 jobs since 2013 in Intel. Average compensation is about $140,000. with wages and benefits. These are good paying jobs in the oil and gas industry, and they provide an incredible service, not just to our children or our state, but in a national security environment, they provide a lot of security for our country. They provide the ability to do commerce through shipping lanes, through over the road, through air. They do a lot of good things. There's some things they could do better, and we'll take a look at that. So I'm very much excited to look at this ordinance or no ordinance. It's going to be somewhere in between. But the main thing that I'm mostly concerned about is our jobs. We have too many people that are having a tough time making ends meet, having a tough time with increased P&M rates. They're having a tough time with higher property taxes. They're having a tough time with higher gas prices. They're having a tough time losing their jobs. They're having a tough time raising their families. And it needs to stop. I hope we bottomed out here in New Mexico, and now we've turned the corner. And the oil and gas industry is extremely important, but we must protect our environment at the same time. So again, I appreciate all of you coming down from Farmington, Mr. Mullins, from a fellow veteran back there, coming down from Cabazon. See some people that came up from southeast New Mexico as well, or from out of state where this gentleman unfortunately lived. I hope he moved back here full time. It'd be great to have him back. So again, thank you, and Director Springfield, I know you're going to be busy as well as you should, and we're going to get this right. We're going to get it right for the people of Sandoval County and the people of New Mexico. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Block. So I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. We're a good 55 minutes beyond, or not that far, about 45 minutes beyond what I thought we were going to be today. Just a couple of observations. But first, I want to thank all those industry experts that came today to provide expert testimony to the subject matter at hand. I thought it would be appropriate to have a workshop for the new commission because we've got 3 new commissioners as of January who didn't participate in last year's workshop when we kicked this whole thing off with the discussion about having an ordinance that involved oil and gas operations in Sandoval County. This is like being in Aunt Betty's pickle jar. What I mean by that is that we already have oil and gas operations in Sandoval County and we never had an ordinance. We don't have an ordinance now. We're talking about having an ordinance. So to me, that's one of the options. No ordinance. We seem to be getting along pretty good without one. That's an option. Another option is to have an ordinance. And the appropriate thing that I'm thinking of that an ordinance would apply to are those things where we have statutory and jurisdictional authority. Otherwise, we're treading where we don't belong. The example of Moore County is a good example. One of the things that we try to do as a commission is keep the county from being sued. We like to avoid litigation here in Sandoval County, just like any government entity. And so, you know, we're definitely not going to tread where that's going to get us in trouble. I'm like any elected official. I do this because I want to do something and give back to my community for my constituents. That's why I'm here. That's the only reason why I'm here, really. And so I always say the same thing when we're talking about ordinances or policy or whatnot, that we're going to strive to get it right, even if it takes us a little longer to get it done. However, having said that, one of the worst things that you can do if you're in government is create uncertainty, and I think that's what we're doing here in the process. We're creating uncertainty where we really don't need to create uncertainty, and that's one of the worst things that a government can do, especially if you are putting yourself out there, which we are in Sandoval County, as being a business-friendly economic development county in the state of New Mexico. So a little bit of a dichotomy there, but this is the sort of thing that you find yourself in when you're trying to govern. I wanted to point out and get it on the record that we did receive a letter from our state legislators in the area here, a letter of support for the commission, knowing that we're taking on, you know, this idea of an oil and gas ordinance. The letter basically cautions us to be careful and not over-regulate an industry that is basically, I think it's safe to say, the foundation of the economy here in New Mexico. I know we were debating earlier when Dr. Clifford was presenting, you know, what would be the effect if, you know, you shut down the oil and gas industry in New Mexico. It'd be 7 times the fold of the budget situation that we have now, where there's a $300 million shortfall. Consider a $2.5 billion shortfall. I mean, you're effectively going to shut down the whole state. So I just thought I'd make that distinction. I can do some math on the fly, and so I just did some. We also received a letter of support from the Sandoval Economic Alliance, and I wanted to mention this one because, you know, this is an initiative that Sandoval County took on to try and create opportunity and jobs here in our community, and it would just be counter to that to step in with an ordinance that was onerous and burdensome to the oil and gas industry, so I don't see us going there. What we have to decide though today is, as a commission, what are we going to do going forward? My recommendation, unless I hear anything to the contrary, is for P&Z to go ahead and have this meeting on the 24th with OCD. Let's see what comes out of that. And then I think it would be appropriate to circle the wagons and decide then, do we want to do one of 3 options? Do nothing, do an ordinance, and if we do an ordinance, we've got to make sure that that ordinance is not overreaching, for lack of a better description. I want to thank everybody for their input today. I think it was important because the new commissioners on the commission now have a foundational knowledge anyway of the oil and gas business as it exists in the state and it exists in our county. And going forward, it enables us to make an informed decision. I always like to make one last offer before we close the meeting. Is there anybody in the public that wants to address the commission on this subject? It has to be something new that hasn't been said yet. Yes, sir.
So on this subject, I would like to just take a moment with a local perspective. My name is Grant Taylor. I work for the Association of Commerce and Industry. I've lived in Albuquerque for about a year. First of all, I want to echo the comments made by Ms. Sontag and Mr. Flynn that really want to urge you to avoid duplication up to not adopting a zoning ordinance. But before I came to Albuquerque, I was the CEO of the Hobbs Chamber of Commerce for 5 years and lived in the Hobbs area for 8 years. One of the things that I got to really enjoy during my tenure was comparing the gross receipts tax distributions to local governments. And if the city of Hobbs was not second in the state for its gross receipts tax distributions, it was third, only behind Albuquerque and at times behind Las Cruces. The peak of that GRT distribution trend for Hobbs was February 2016, almost $10 million. And that's a city with a population of 35,000. So imagine what these communities are able to do for their public safety, their roads, public spaces. And this is because they have oil and gas operators, field services companies who are doing the work out of those municipalities. The work is not being done within the city limits, but they're doing their billing there. It's where their offices are. That's how they do their billing. And in the city of Hobbs, we had a gross receipts tax rate of 6.8125. When was the last time any city in this part of the world was less than 7%? So it speaks a great deal to the kind of business activity that there is. One of the things that has been mentioned is that these oil and gas jobs are not for locals. And what I can tell you is that if the oil and gas industry has the opportunity to expand, you certainly will have locals who are being hired. And if it is of substance, you have the higher education resources to create workforce development, as has been seen with San Juan College, New Mexico Junior College, Eastern New Mexico University at Roswell. So your locals have the opportunity to be prepared and geared up for the jobs that are available with oil and gas. Personally, my hometown is Artesia. My mom has 6 brothers, all of whom have worked in oil and gas, whether that's as pumpers, drillers, truck drivers, and now they're all nearing retirement, so they've worked their entire careers in oil and gas. My namesake moved to southeastern New Mexico in the 1930s to do oil and gas, and it has been a mainstay industry for my family, providing a livelihood for my family. My uncles took me out rock hounding, hunting in the same area where they work. They individually are good stewards. They worked for companies that are good stewards because the land is where they live, work, and recreate. So all this is to say that real people, real New Mexicans, work in the oil and gas industry. Sandoval County has really gained a reputation for being focused on job creation. And if you have the opportunity to expand oil production in Sandoval County, take it. Don't let it pass you by. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. At this point, I would like to ask my fellow commissioners if they have any other comments that they'd like to add today. None?
Well,
Commissioner
I just support the comment that you made in terms of how we should proceed here, so.
Okay. What about you, Commissioner Blah?
Mr. Chairman, I support you.
Commissioner Dominguez?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. If there's any other comment, this meeting is adjourned.